I remember before I really started my music career, I had bought a $500,000 home in the Oakland Hills when my business was doing great. And suddenly the business just dropped out. The market collapsed, we went into somewhat of a recession, and I could no longer pay my mortgage. That was one of the most stressful times in my life. Knowing that I had this big home that I wanted to live in, but I can no longer pay the mortgage. I don't know how I'm gonna pay the mortgage. I had to put it up for sale, and luckily I was able to sell it. But if I wasn't able to sell it, I would have been really fucked. And to go through and not only would I have had my house taken away from me, but then I would have a foreclosure on my record, which then haunts you for the next 7 years, which fucks up your life. So I mean, it really could. A mortgage could kill you.
That's a fact.
The stress of a mortgage could kill you prematurely.
The crazy part about it all is the fact that the Corrections Corporation of America acts as a surety, in which case they behave like an insurance for mortgage companies or financial institutions in the event people go into default. Now, the game plan is for people to go into default. They've already factored in what your mother's spending habits was, what your father's spending habits were, what neighborhood you in, and the mean or rate or ratio amongst everybody that's in that community and the likeliness for them to be able to pay their bills. And in turn, they decide, well, you know what, this person could afford $150,000. Let's give them a $250,000 debt.
Right.
And so when people get locked up and they sign or was signed for them on their behalf, depending on the circumstance, is a bid bond, payment bond, and performance bond. And those three bonds are consolidated into what's called a mortgage-backed security. And now they're paying their debt back to society in the form of free labor that gets allocated towards people's flawed mortgage endeavors. So people in prison are paying for people's foreclosures.
Wow.
And therefore, it's easier for them to say, hey, let's sell people on things they can't afford because we got a surety in place or a form of insurance that says, hey, when this fails, these people pay. And some of our soldiers as well for America also accommodate for some of those mortgage-backed securities. So some of their deaths are allocated from insurance companies to indemnify the bonds. And when you have a system working like that, why would you want to wait 30 years for capital you don't have, especially if you're the commercial bank? Because the investment bank is who the commercial bank is servicing loans for. They're getting everybody into all of these promises and then creating this one bonded promissory note and turning it over like the little drug dealer to the big drug dealer that's selling the weight. So the commercial bank like BOFA, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, US Bank, all of them are just getting people into a bunch of promises, death pledges, mortgages, combine them all into one large dollar amount, then try to get a 5 or 10% commission off of it because they don't have the capital to wait 30 years out. While the private investment bank says, hey, what we're going to do under a condition is allow people to invest on these flawed mortgage endeavors that are potential, of course, for people to go into default. So it's a horrible system, and that's why we have to raise people's economic cognizance more than the racial construct, because the racial construct is not preparing us to be able to take care of our children. It doesn't pay the bills. You know, when your house is foreclosed upon, nothing about what you care about race comes into play. Right. So I'm not telling people to not know their history. It's very, very important that they know their history. I'm telling people they have to prioritize what they put their time and energy into, because the energy they expend on worrying about racial relations doesn't feed their family. You lose your wife under those circumstances. You lose the respect of your children under those circumstances, especially when you come from poor communities. As a black man, we can ill afford to be so overwhelmed by racial matters that we override or undermine our obligation to secure properly our family. So what we don't want to wind up happening is saying to ourselves, hey, you know what? I'm talking about all this pro-black Pan-Africanism, which is very important, should be part of the curriculum. That's why I homeschool my children. So I can give them what I feel at best, what they need to know that schools won't give them. Whilst at the same time, we have to make sure we appropriate a lot more time to making sure we can run a business, understand how to properly run it, keep it afloat, what kind of homes to invest in, what kind of debt scenarios we don't want to be in. Like, for instance, if you're just starting, you don't want more than 2 credit cards. And when you get 2 because more than 2 credit cards could lower your credit score. And when you have 2 credit cards, you want to have a balance transfer option on your credit cards, because you should know never to spend more than 15% that of the amount of money that they give you on a credit line. So if I get a credit card for $1,000, I shouldn't spend more than $150. If I wind up spending $200, I want to use my credit card's balance transfer option to allocate the extra 50 into the other credit card. In doing so, they'll see that I'm making conscientious decisions as a consumer, and I'll actually get points on my credit for making those kind of decisions. But to say, hey, I got $1,000 credit limit, let me spend less than 1,000, like 850, they'll get you for that. And you'll think, you know what, I'm doing good because I can pay it back. No, sometimes activity can hurt you, and the lack of the same can hurt you. You have to know the through line and the nuances to this. So it's all a matrix, and this is not being taught to us. We have to get in tune with it. And what I was saying about insurance earlier was that we're not taught to have insurance, especially whole life insurance, the type of insurance that we can borrow against, or to say we can benefit from the insurance while we're alive, as opposed to when we die. Like, you can use insurance to purchase real estate or pay for a medical bill. Right. You feel me? But that's whole life insurance, which most of us get the other insurance, right? And in addition to that, when I pass away, whenever that happens, which is inevitable, at least my family knows they got a cool minimum 6 figures coming to them, minimum.
Right.
And per parent, my children are all going to get over $1 million. This is a fact. So here it is, the average black family who has no insurance because it's not part of culture. And that's what I was talking about earlier with common customs, which is a calculus system that precipitates culture. If it's not in your culture, meaning it's not a setting in the community that suggests this is how we do things, and everyone does things just like this. Like in hip hop, it's customary for us to wear jewelry. It's part of hip hop culture. You don't have your chain, you don't have your wrist lit up, you're not hip hop, right? Or maybe your pants sag. It's customary that may take place, right? So that's the culture of hip hop. Now, the culture of adults is what we got to get back into. And in the culture of adults, we should have financial planning that even goes into our death. And in doing so, you make sure that in a debt wealth society, you can diffuse the momentum of debt wealth by placing inherited wealth exponents there. And so we combat the debt wealth by sacrificing in this generation to make sure the next generation we have properly accommodated for the next generation. So now we look and we say, you know what? When this Jewish person dies, wow, their child just got $1 million off their death. This black person dies, the house is in probate, they have nothing. You feel me? Now, whose fault is that? That's not necessarily racism at this point. That's a lack of knowledge. There's a disconnect. And if the teacher that you're listening to has you focusing on hate this one, hate that one, and while other people's teachers or culture have set the stage for them to make preparation for when they're gone, life is not hard for their children. At that point, it's hard to pull the race card with that conversation.
I feel you.
It's an educational disconnect that's taking place. And I'm very racially proud, but some things I just can't go for no more because I've learned better. And when you learn better, you do better. And then you exercise better, and then you go to teach and share better. But what happens when the people you share it back with say, oh man, you believe in this system? That's the white man's system. See, then how do you talk to that person at that point? You know? And then when you move on and you say, well, you know what? Since this is how y'all feel, you continue to live the way you choose to live. I won't live like that. Then am I wrong? No. But of course I will be in the eyes and in the mind of the people who don't know better. And that's the problem. When the people doing the education don't know better, and the innocent people who want to do better find those people first. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.